Thanks for listening to Del Aware. Here's Peter MacArthur.
Hey, good morning, 9:37. Well, it was about an hour ago. Latest jobs numbers came out, and they are headed in the wrong direction. Unexpectedly, they rose. Another 1.1 million U.S. workers filing for initial unemployment benefits last week. That is higher than analysts had expected. Chris Burkhardt joining us as he does a lot of Thursdays from his staffing agency, Placers Staffing. And Chris, first of all, what are you thinking about these numbers? Not the greatest news we've heard today.
Well, good morning to you.
Good morning.
I think we see a job market that is quite turbulent and choppy, and the rebound is fluctuating from week to week, or the decline is fluctuating, and so we see a really interesting environment where some businesses are in demand, their product is in demand, and they're hiring, but we see many that are negatively impacted. They simply have less demand for their product or service, and they're adjusting their hiring plans accordingly. Unlike fourth quarter of last year, January, these are somewhat recessionary times, and not all businesses or boats are rising. And I think you got to find the boats or businesses that are winning due to this change in environment. And gosh, consumer preferences and household habits have changed so much. We're using more internet, we're using more tech, we're baking more. Need I mention toilet paper? So those companies and those that supply them are hiring, but it's just weird to understand, especially if you're a job seeker trying to figure it all out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point. So, here we sit. We're beyond the midpoint now of 2020, and it's kind of likely, Chris, probably that companies and candidates haven't had time to really self-evaluate how they've done during the pandemic. Any thoughts on how to go about evaluating the changes and the shifts that have been made?
Well, one really interesting thing is placers and many of our customers are finding it incredibly difficult to find talent right now, harder than when unemployment was at a 50-year low. So if we're going to analyze kind of where we are beyond this midpoint, I think it's fair to say that workers need to feel safe and don't. And that there's really significantly new issues that are popping up, things like childcare. It's a very serious household concern, and many households today are being forced to have a spouse stay home to watch children, especially with the school systems having hybrid schedules or work from home schedules. The other strange thing is job postings are down compared to what you would normally see, and I think that also is very confusing to people as they're trying to analyze what opportunities exist and those kinds of things. If you're a candidate trying to figure this out, you've got to ask companies, if you get a chance to go through a hiring process, kind of how they did during this pandemic lockdown. Did they furlough? Did they downsize? Were they able to change their focus, as many were, to maybe produce PPE or medical supplies or hand sanitizer? Those are not just a handful of stories. A lot of businesses changed to help and to keep people working. And now I think work is it's not just some experiment. Work is now different. Jobs are kind of becoming remote. Safety protocols, you walk into a building with a temperature scanner, or masks or office sanitizing are now kind of part of this new normal.
You raise a good point too, and we've talked about this before, asking the potential employer about how they fared in the pandemic and the importance of those questions when they say, do you have any questions for us? And here we are with a prime example. Never more important is that kind of a question to be asking someone you might be working for if things work out.
Yeah, and I think it would be too harsh a judgment. A lot of businesses might lose money for a month or a quarter this year or for the year. I think generally speaking, a lot of businesses are down. But I think it is a good judge of a company to understand how they've responded, what protocols they put in place, how people are responding or rallying in the business to take advantage of opportunities. I think the best companies are figuring out how to leverage their employees and, make something happen during a tough time. Not let a good calamity go to waste, but try and take advantage of it.
Yeah, sure thing. Chris, let's address this. Are there benefits or aspects of the compensation packages that are coming out of COVID and how work has changed that job seekers should be looking for? Like what are the businesses looking at changing in order to attract more candidates?
Well, some might be obvious. If a job can be remote, that is being thought about, and many people are viewing that as an advantage. You've got reduced time in the car, reduced expenses, wear and tear on your vehicle. Companies are aware that, that's a good perk. And it seems like people are putting more time in, and it might be a good win-win. There's all kinds of flexible scheduling where as long as you get the work done, you can work around childcare or household-related stuff. And we're seeing a lot of hybrid schedules where a couple of days are remote and a couple of days are in the office. But some of the things, there's no campuses, so there's no ping pong tables and,
right,
food on Fridays kind of things. But what we are seeing is that there's a need. There are stipends for things like cell phones or increased home office internet costs. But the really big one that I think is interesting is we all realize now we've got to get off of our kitchen table or the sofa, and we've got to get set up properly at home. So there's good organizations are helping people get set up with things like office and monitors and furniture, so they can get out of the kitchen and into a proper work environment.
Yeah, touche on that.
And that's a biggie. And probably not every organization is able to face off on some of the bigger challenges. But big tech, for example, right now is leading the way, providing additional time off with, childcare and those kinds of things. They're looking at things like helping subsidize tutors and other things like that, including some childcare thoughts, because those are the issue du jour right now. It's how are we going to get work done but have our kids in the house?
Chris, you think of the 9-to-5 traditional stance employer and the head-spinning elements all this present in terms of kind of the new demands or the new needs from their workforce.
There's a conflict. It's a pretty equally split camp. Half are saying, work from home forever. The other half are really posing arguments that collaboration and innovation and just the benefit of casual conversation and how it strengthens teams and relationships and ultimately helps the company's bottom line, they just can't wait to get back to work. Right. But I think we are seeing that it is changed. I don't know if our campuses are going to need to be as large. I think that behaviors have changed. There'll be some work-at-home element here. But there's a real disagreement and divide on how this is going to play out.
Yeah. Let's talk about this. A couple months in now, and we've seen quite a ride during that time. Things were just awful at the beginning of the pandemic. We thought we were turning a corner, which I'm not really sure we completed that turn. And now we have uncertainty that presents itself in a couple different ways. The loss of the $600 unemployment addition, whatever that becomes, we're not really sure. So what advice would you give on how people should continue, Chris, with that job market search?
Well, I guess if you've listened to me on a host of Thursdays, I've had kind of a consistent theme. So some of this maybe is a reinforcement to listeners, but I think a lot of folks are trying to think about their job search as summer kind of begins to wind down here too. So a little bit of repetition. But I would say you just have to understand that today almost 100% of the interview process will be digital and it will be remote. So you may use Zoom with your family, you may use it with friends, but it's still different and a bit odd to use it in an interview. And the preparation around that is if I find that many people struggle with a normal face-to-face interview. There's a host of challenges in preparation when you start doing things by video. So I think, getting ready for that and thinking about that if you're going back to it. The other key point is sort of going back to that beginning. Many workers did not go back to their jobs. In fact, 3 out of 10 went back to their original jobs on a local basis. So situations really have changed, maybe even since the last time I was on the radio. So I think taking time to evaluate that I've always believed that rather than chase a job digitally on the internet, focus on the companies you want to work at and revisit. And with this sort of change and chop, I think you might be surprised that many of the companies that maybe they said no to you in the spring, they may not say no to you now.
Wow. Great advice, because obviously when you're in this mix, your head can be spinning, turning in a million different directions. So just to kind of get that refocus from you is awesome, Chris. MyPlacers.com's a great resource too, by the way.
Thank you, Pete. I appreciate that very much. As I've been saying, if anyone's out there and they don't have access to a PC with libraries being closed and they'd like help with their resume or any of the things that are related to a job search, all they have to do is go to myplacers.com or Placers Active Kindness, and we're just willing to help. There's no need for compensation or anything like that. We just think it's our part and how we can help workers get redeployed during these strange times.
Yeah, sounds good. Chris Burkhardt joining us as he does frequently to talk about, well, the job situation and your place in that. Chris, thanks as always. I hope you have a good rest of the day.
Thank you. You too.